Hey everybody, I'm Ian. I'm a recovering alcoholic and addict. I'm sure there's a lot of other titles I could put in there, but let's just stick with the basics for today. So I'm thinking about what to share about. If I were to pick a theme or a central focus, I would say desperation. Um, what led me into recovery and away from that spiritual malady that affects us all. And yeah, no matter if you went through the 12 steps or you went through the LifeLab or recovery through faith in Christ, we all know that word. We all know that desperation. What brings us to our knees and sees and shows us that showed me that I had nothing inside and needed some serious help. I'm going to back up for a minute, though. Give you a little brief background on me. So, where to begin? Well, I was born in Nova Scotia. I was born in Truro, Nova Scotia. And I was living in Philadelphia for the first 2 years of my life. Not that I can really remember anything, but my father was in ministry school and he was studying to be a minister. And he graduated. He got his own congregation, though that congregation was pretty much 3 or 4 people. That's including me and my mother. So it wasn't really working out. So he thought God was calling him in a different way. And we moved back to Nova Scotia. And my parents had their own little janitorial service for a while. And then Dad joined the Air Force and went back to school. Mom went back to university. So it was a very busy childhood. And we moved around a lot after Dad graduated and within the Maritimes, and then finally got posted to into Oromocto base Gagetown, where he was a doctor in the Air Force. And I was the ADHD uncontrollable child. So I got diagnosed with ADHD. This goes into my addiction. When I was in grade 7. I didn't know what that was. I never really took it seriously. And I was prescribed Ritalin. And so I don't know if I really took it properly at first or took it at all. I think I used to hide it, so I didn't have to take it. And then I think I was 16, and my little brother, found this article in a magazine that said that Ritalin was called old man's cocaine. And for some reason that did something in my mind. And I said, hey, that's kind of cool. So that was when I first started abusing medication and drugs. And that went on for about a year. And unbeknownst to me of what addiction was or abuse was, my parents sent me off to a place called Portage, which was a drug rehabilitation place for teens. And but I had no desperation at that point. I had no giving up. I had not felt complete defeat or powerlessness. Not that I knew what any of that was, but so to be honest, I think I learned more about drugs inside that place than I did on the outside. And I came back with a knowledge of even bigger drugs. And although it was like an 8-month program, and I might have learned a lot about different feelings. I remember this feeling chart being up there of like 100 different feelings. I'm like, how is that possible to have 100 different feelings? Anyway, I didn't really pay attention too much to that, but that came back later in life as a benefit. But I've been through about 8 different places in recovery, none of which I went there for myself, and none of which were led by any sort of admission of powerlessness or defeat. But I want to kind of touch on that spiritual malady and how I came to that place of desperation. So if I think my addiction started to really come about when I was about 18. And from 18 to 25, there was this huge build as my mind and my body were just declining. So I was 18 years old. I grew up in a Christian home. So obviously it was preached or, told no sex before marriage, anything like that. So there was a huge shame around that. And, but at the same time, I was 18. I lost my virginity to a girl, and we started to live together. And then about a month later, her ex-boyfriend came to the door and told her that he was diagnosed HIV positive. And she came to me and told me, and I didn't know what to do with that information. And it scared the heck out of me. And I broke up with her. I didn't want to know. And if I saw her after that point, I would just run, literally walk away. So I didn't have to talk to her, and I didn't find out whether or not I had this disease. And I wouldn't get tested for 7 years. Now, in that 7-year period, I was just living under this not knowing, living under this false reality. Someone told me once that you could live up to 8 years with AIDS. And that scared the heck out of me too. But my internal clock said I had 8 years. So in order to cope with that fear and that extreme anxiety and mind warp, I started drinking more. I started finding heavier and heavier drugs. Everything and anything just to get the thoughts out of my head. It came to a point where I was, if I had like a red mark on my body, I just thought it was some sort of a lesion that was going to that indicated that I had this disease, HIV, and my mind just kept on getting more warped, and my drug use and my addiction kept on getting bigger and bigger. And this brings me to the place where I 25 years old, and I picked up a book called The Purpose-Driven Life, and I read it, and it said to do it chapter by chapter, and this sense of intimacy, this sense of belief in God. This is where I first got really introduced to faith, to a relationship with God, more so than just what I grew up with, trying to avoid church at any cost. And, basically the only time I was in the Bible is if I was told that I had to memorize my 10 verses a month for the Christian school that I was in to spout them off at the end of the month, So, and a lot of the times I had a cheat sheet written on my hand. So, anyway, 25 years old, and I picked up this book, and things started to turn around. I felt close to God. I felt God's presence in my life. And he gave me the courage to finally admit to someone that I thought I was dying, and the courage to get tested. So back then, it usually takes about 2 weeks for a result to come back. And when I got tested, the results came back the very next day. I remember praying right after the test. I was like, God, I can't handle this 2 weeks. I can't do this. And I'm just not strong enough. And I think I was about 115 pounds and couldn't eat. I thought that was part of the disease, but it was just really, I was just so anxious. I couldn't eat and I was losing weight. Anyway, the results came back the very next day and they were negative. Of course, I got tested again, but I fell to my knees. I thanked God. I was crying. I was just in just joy when I heard that. And I thought I was good after that. I thought I got what I needed, and but I had grown this full out blown addiction, and I'm like, yeah, I might not be dying of AIDS, but I'm killing myself in a different way. Not that I looked at it like that. I thought I was like, like I have this wonderful relationship with God now. He took me through. He showed me signs. Like I am good to go. I'm on the back deck, and I got a beer in my hand, and I'm cheersing God, saying thanks for my sobriety, for my because I quit the big drugs and I was just drinking. So just completely delusional. I had no program of recovery. I just and once I got what I needed, my relationship with God started to decline again. And based on that, everything can be put back or from my relationship with God. My relationships with others depend on my relationship with God. And if I don't have a relationship with God, I have no sustainable power or positive influence or anything in my life. So it was a pretty quick decline after that, back to a life of drug abuse and alcoholism, and that got worse and worse. And I sought comfort through relationships, and I want to get to the point where I pretty much had lost everything, because that's what brought me back to God. And so I met someone. Her name is Heather. We started dating. We started living together, and then we got married. But I had not really taken care of my addiction problem, and she didn't know how bad it was. So the relationship went back and forth. It was pretty bad for a long time, until she gave me an ultimatum. And she said, get help, or we're going to have to be separated. And a year before, we had just had a son. And that was basically out of like a month of abstinence from alcohol and drugs. And we both thought we were good, and that, we should have a child. We planned it, and this is going to make everything good. So, which, didn't work. I went to a 1-month program called Sobriety House. But obviously I was going for the wrong reasons there as well. So I relapsed about a week after I graduated that program. And then the 4 years after that, it was just a very loss of everything. My relationships with my family, my mother, my father, my brother, my sister, separation from my wife and son. And I just fell into self-pity and more addiction, and it got stronger and stronger and stronger till I started losing my jobs, bouncing from one job to another, bouncing from one house to another, renting, and getting kicked out, getting a job, getting fired. I had no manageability in my life. And I think it was 1 year ago when I was couch surfing. So basically I had no home. And I was on my last couch, and it was probably about 2 weeks before I knew when I was going to have no place to live. And something hit me. Something just hit me, and I couldn't do it anymore. And I called my sponsor, my old sponsor from 4 years prior to that. His name was Sean. And I said, man, I'm in trouble. I got nothing left, and I'm so sick and tired of being so sick and tired. And he said, well, let me see if I can get you a place to stay, and we'll talk about Jericho. I knew Jericho was a 9-month program, and I'm like, man, 9 months. I don't know if I can do that. No way. 9 months. That's almost a year. That's no way. I wouldn't be able to see my son. I wouldn't be able to work. But I wasn't seeing my son anyway, and I wasn't working. So all these excuses that were coming up in my head were just that. They were just excuses. And until I finally gave up and gave in, my Sean called me back and said, I found someone to take you in for, up to a month while you wait for a place in Jericho. And little did I know it was him and his wife and his 2-year-old son at the time. And there were about 30 people in line ahead of me. And I think it was 3 or 4 days later that I got a spot and I got a bed. And I remember walking into UCC the first day on the Sunday before the Wednesday that I went, and I was just in tears, just bawling. And I was reading through the 12 and 12, and something just bounces out, and it's right on the first page, and it says, "It is truly awful to admit that, drug of choice in hand, we have warped our minds into such an obsession for destructive using that only an act of providence can remove it from us." At that point, I didn't know what that was, but I did know God to some level. And I knew that there was a relationship there. And I began to feel his presence again. The reading goes on, it says, "No other kind of bankruptcy is like this. Drug of choice had now become the rapacious creditor, bleeds us of all self-sufficiency, and all will to resist its demands. Once this stark fact is accepted, our bankruptcy as going human concerns is complete. Upon entering into recovery, we soon take quite another view of this absolute humiliation. We perceive that only through the utter defeat are we able to make our first steps towards liberation and strength. Our mission of personal powerlessness finally turn out to be the firm bedrock upon which happy and purposeful lives may be built." When I read that, I'm like, that's it. It's that desperation that got me there. The fact that I knew I had nothing left and I had no power to make myself better. And I got on my knees and I prayed that first day in Jericho. And I said, "God, take it, because I can't do it." And I didn't really realize that I was partially in step 1, step 2, and step 3 at the same time. There wasn't like a bunch of writing assignments to get there. It was just the fact that I knew I had nothing and I knew God had everything. And I gave up. And then I went on this journey of refinement as I went through the steps. And I started learning about what makes me tick. And I started learning about Christ and about God and about grace and about forgiveness and about love. And I started listening to these promises thinking, wow, I want to intuitively know how to handle situations that I never knew how to handle before. Like if I knew that, I probably would have got tested when I was 18 right away. And, never had to go through 7 years of that mind deterioration. And it paints a picture of life without God, paints a picture of that spiritual malady when I'm just being driven by fear and not guided by God. And when I started being guided by God, all these things started to come back in my life. Even before I had finished the program, my parents and my family were talking to me. I talked to my ex and I got to FaceTime with my son for the first time in a year. And keeping that spirit of humility, these relationships started to flourish even more as I learned more about this refinement process and more about how God guides me. And eventually I got to see my son face to face. And then after that, I got to hang out with him one-on-one. And this past Christmas, for the first time in 4 years, I got to go to my son's house and I got to watch him open his presents. And a couple days later, I was asked to come and babysit while his mother and her partner went out. So I was in the house, just me and James. And I just got asked again today to babysit again, to come into the home, which I was shunned from because I had that spiritual malady, because I didn't have any sort of desire to change. And now based on that change, all these things are coming into my life, not back into my life, not renewed, but new. These are all new things that I have, new relationships, there's just so much that I've got from God in recovery. And I'm so happy for that desperation. I'm so happy for that powerlessness. They say in the meetings sometimes, I'm a grateful recovering alcoholic. I'm like, when I first heard that, I'm like, you're an idiot. Like, that makes no sense. Don't talk to me. But it's true. If I didn't have this, if I hadn't have come to that place of total loss, rock bottom, desperation, I would not have been led into the relationship that heals me from that spiritual malady. And so I thank God every day for that. I got a long way to go, but I have hope, and I finally am in a place where I actually like myself, that I give myself, I practice self-compassion, and yeah, and that's all from God, all from recovery. So I don't know how long that was or how I did, but that's it.